Hello everyone, I'm David Rainstorm, a CPA in Atlanta, and welcome to our presentation on automating financial statements in Microsoft Excel. Over the course of this presentation, I'm going to share with you a number of techniques that you can use to build financial statements more effectively in Microsoft Excel. You're going to find that we're going to be spending a lot of time on groundwork because really that's where the key to making all this work effectively comes in. If we set the stage properly, then building the reports themselves will actually be easy. Also, they will be self-updating so that we can export reports out of our accounting software, simply overwrite the existing file that we worked with last time. When we open up our financial statement in Excel, it'll update itself, and then we can focus on analyzing the numbers rather than spending a bunch of time trying to manipulate the data to get it into the format that we wish. So you'll find we'll be spending time working with Microsoft Query today, seeing how we can explore that and use that to create links to data that we've exported from other sources, and then pulling some other techniques together to build more effective financial statements. In my presentations, I do try to accommodate you no matter what version of Excel you might be using, which could be Excel 2007, 10, 13, or 16. For today's material, everything we cover is going to work the same way across all four versions of Excel, with one exception. There's one command that is going to be in a slightly different place if you're using the Office 365 version of Excel 2016. So when we get to that point in the presentation, I'll show you how to identify where to locate that particular command that could be in two different places depending on your version of Excel. For most of us, it's just going to be up front and center on the data menu. For those of us using Office 365, we'll have to click on a different command to get there. Beyond that, everything I talk about today does work the same way across all four versions of Excel. You will see me demonstrate everything at least twice. I do walk you through it first on the PowerPoint slides, which are very detailed and have numbered steps. And once I've done that, I go over to Excel 2016 and then demonstrate those steps firsthand. So you'll see me build the financial statement from scratch as we go along today. The handouts include an example workbook that has the completed financial statement. And then also there's an example workbook that has related articles that relate to material that I've covered today. So I do try to leave you with a lot of takeaways from choosing one of my presentations. We're going to extract data from QuickBooks today, using that as our foundation for building these financial statements. The techniques I share, though, are equally applicable to any accounting software out there. There are a few common characteristics that we'll need to look for in getting our data out of the accounting program. And many times we end up recreating financial statements in Excel because simply the accounting software won't let us consolidate data the way that we need to, or let us add in calculations and so on. And often just even extracting the data out of the accounting software can be a feat in itself, such that once we get it over to Excel, there can be a variety of issues that in some cases can either feel like deal breakers to you or just simply will complicate the process. So some complications that you might encounter when you export a report from Excel is you might have a blank column between each month. Blank columns cause all kinds of problems in Excel, because Excel's features work best when all of our cells are contiguous. And so many accounting programs will try to be friendly, if you will, and try to add in some white space into the spreadsheet. But typically, if I'm sending the data over to Excel, it's not because I'm just going to simply tweak a couple numbers. It's because I want to actually analyze the data. And so those blank columns are going to be a wrinkle, but fortunately, we'll be able to overcome that. Another thing you may find, particularly with QuickBooks in particular, is if you have accounts and then also sub-accounts, you may find that the account numbers get strewn across two or more columns there. That in turn makes it really tough to write formulas to summarize things because, sometimes the account numbers are in different columns and so complicates writing formulas there. So that's another thing we'll be able to overcome. We'll be able to have a helper column over to the right that will consolidate these multiple account numbers into a single column so we can then reference them with our formulas. We may also have some extraneous heading rows that appear. There's going to be a way that we can weed those out so we have less noise when we get the data in Excel. And then also sometimes there's extraneous workbooks that piggyback, worksheets that piggyback along the way. Those are less of an issue. That's just kind of some noise. But what we're going to find is that once we get the data out of our accounting software, we're going to go through a one-time process with Microsoft Query and kind of clean up some of these issues so that they don't plague us going forward. and also set up some resilience so that the spreadsheet becomes self-updating. We'll be able to just simply export the data from the accounting software, save over that existing file that we started with, and when we open up our financial statement, it'll pull the data in automatically. So let's begin by launching QuickBooks, and we'll go into QuickBooks Desktop for a moment and just use that just so we can kind of see what we want to look for in other accounting packages. You're going to find that I prefer, when possible, to export a 12-month profit and loss or income statement from the accounting software. That means that once we get the data over to Excel, we'll be able to have a single report that will let us retrieve data for any month of the year. And so instead of the approach that a lot of users take, where they'll create a new worksheet for every month of the year, anytime we start taking our data and spreading it across sideways, such as having a tab for every month of the year, we are slowly and exponentially making Excel ever more complicated to use. So instead, we're going to keep all the data siloed. We're only going to have 2 worksheets in this workbook. We're going to have a data worksheet and then a report worksheet from which we'll be able to retrieve data for any month of the year. So if we are using the desktop version of QuickBooks and we wanted to create a profit and loss report, the first step, we would go to the Reports menu in QuickBooks. Step 2, we would go to Company and Financial. And then step 3, we're going to choose Profit and Loss Standard. That will bring up the report on the screen there. And then we'll find that once we do so, we'll be able to change it to retrieve data for this fiscal year. That's what's going to give us a 12-month period. Now, by default, QuickBooks is going to jam all 12 months into a single column. So that's why step 5 there, we're going to say that we want to have a column for each month. So just about every accounting package is going to give you a way to be able to create a 12-month format. You have to tinker with some settings to achieve that format, or it may be a built-in format. In the case of QuickBooks, there is the ability to memorize reports. So notice there's a memorize button. Many times if you do have to customize a report, you'll be able to save those settings so that you don't have to go and recreate the settings each time that you export your financial report. So that is an optional step. Whether or not we memorize the report though, step 7, our next step, is to get that report over to Excel. So we'll look for an Excel button. Pretty much every accounting package lets us directly export to an Excel workbook. Step 8 shows that we can create a new worksheet. Step 9 will then confirm we want to create a new worksheet. Step 10, we'll click Export. Once we open up that report in Excel, we'll then save it. And in this case, because the sample company I'm using will be set for the year 2022, I'm going to call it 2022 Financials. And then going forward, anytime I want to update my Excel report, I'll just repeat this process and just save over that initial 2022 file. In QuickBooks, I'm going to work with the sample product-based business. So we'll say open a sample file. We'll come down and we'll say sample product-based business. We'll make that choice. So here's our reports menu. The second choice down is the memorized report list. And so if we were to choose to memorize a report, it would then show up on this list. So once we've applied those settings and we memorize it, we'd be able to just choose a report with one click there. But since we've not yet memorized the report, instead we'll go further down to Company and Financial. We'll then choose Profit and Loss Standard. When we make that selection, brings up a profit and loss or income statement report, defaults to the current month to date. So we're going to click in here. We're going to change that to this fiscal year so that we have activity for the entire fiscal year. But again, it's jammed it all together into a single column. So our gold standard here is to have 12 months of activity. And in the case of QuickBooks, we look for a show columns command and change it from total only, change it to month. So that gives us activity on a monthly basis. So there's our 12-month report. If I wanted to memorize this report here, I could then click the memorize button there and give it a name. That would then cause it to show up on the memorized report list. But in this case, I'm going to go to the Excel button. I'm going to choose to create a new worksheet. Once I do, we'll say create a new worksheet, and there is an advanced choice here. So your accounting software might give you some control over some of these default settings. For instance, I could tell it to turn off the space between columns. For our purposes today, I'm going to leave that turned on because I do want to have an ugly format so I can show you how to overcome these nuances, because you may not always have control over whether there's space between columns. Also notice that I could turn off this additional worksheet that gets added in there. Again, I'm just going to keep that turned on because I want to keep this export as ugly as possible so we can see how easy it is to overcome these issues. So we'll click OK. We'll click Export. We'll then find that this report will show up over in Excel. Now,